Welcome to the Power of Great. I'm your host, Matt Crane, and every single week we bring you experiences, we bring you guests, we bring you CEOs, entrepreneurs, but more importantly, we bring you individuals that help highlight the main mission of the Power of Great podcast, and that's the recognition that your current situation is not your defining moment. And this week, we have Jeremy Ryan Slate. You know, Jeremy's a published author, blogger, marketing specialist. He holds both a Bachelor's of Administration and a Master's from Seton Hall University, as well as studying literature at Oxford University. With his extensive literature background, you know, Jeremy knows just how to position a business for optimal readership and growth. He understands what entrepreneurs want because he's one too. He's founder and host of the highly successful Create Your Own Life podcast series, which he interviews impressive entrepreneurs to impart their knowledge on those just starting their journey. The show was ranked number 1 in iTunes, new and noteworthy for the category of business, and number 1 in business management and marketing. And if that's not all, it also ranked as high as number 26 in the overall iTunes store. Jeremy Slate, welcome to the Power of Great, my man.
Holy crap, man. That's the first time I heard that intro. My wife, who runs all my PR, she just rewrote it before she sent it to you. Because she's like, man, this sucks. You need a new intro. So, wow, I don't know. I feel like I'm impressed with myself in that.
Well, you know, I think every great podcaster wants to have their niche. And I always tell people that, hey, if I go down as anything, it's to have the best intros of all time.
It's funny because we just went to an event this week, and I'm not somebody that really likes to talk about myself. And we met with this couple where the wife talked about the husband and the husband talked about the wife. And she goes, you know what? I think we're going to start doing that at events because you really don't talk about yourself and you talk about the other person. And it's good, but it doesn't do you any good for them remembering you.
Yes. And you know, to clarify something, it's a business degree, not a bachelor's administration degree. So
no, it's actually a history degree, man. I have a degree in undergrad degree in world religions and a master's degree in ancient history, specifically ancient religion and cults.
Wow. Well, we're talking. So guys and gals on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Pandora. Jeremy and I were talking a little bit offline about the diversity that he brings to the table. So there in itself is some of the diversity that he does bring. So, you know, with that being said, then Jeremy, that brings up a great point. Did your undergrad and then your postgrad lead to you wanting to go and extend that literature studies to Oxford University?
Well, actually, undergrad paid for it. I did so well in undergrad that my college actually paid for it. So I went in between grad and undergrad to Oxford to New College. Did Catholic literature, so we did like Lewis, Chesterton, stuff like that. So we did that program. They paid for it, and then I came back and went to grad school. So because it handled it because, you know, I didn't have to pay for it, and it helped me to get the in, and it actually helped me to meet a lot of people. I got to meet, actually go to C.S. Lewis's house, and he's been gone for, 20 years now, but I got to hang out with the guy that runs his estate and actually have tea with him, which was interesting. But yeah, so it's been awesome for my life and exposing me to other things and actually giving me some level of skill to be able to, write in a lot of publications like I do now too.
Yeah, so for most people, they have this moment. Either it was in their youth, or maybe it was during a college experience, or maybe it was during a life experience that kind of set them on the path on where they wanted to be. And for you, it's been pretty simple. I mean, author, blogger, marketing specialist, podcast host, and something that I find that you're very passionate about is the blogging and the writing aspect.
Yeah.
So is that something that you knew early on that was a space you wanted to play in?
No, Matt, I struggle with that. And the reason being, when you're an academic writer, there's a lot of citations. It's not that interesting to read. So my first book that came out, the book title is in Latin and all the chapter titles are in Latin. And reason being, it only sold a few thousand copies. So it was really difficult for me to take, that type of writing skill and change it to writing marketing copy and, writing different types of articles that will inform and educate people. And I had to kind of find my voice again because I used to be a big creative writer before college. So it was a little bit of actually a struggle, man. It was a little bit of a struggle. And I think it derailed me a little bit. But the thing I learned in school and grad school and writing was the skill of research. And that's how I've been able to meet a lot of people, find a lot of things online. In the marketing company that I work at, you know, it's kind of hard for my boss to give me a job title, because I generally figure out anything you need figured out. And I'm really good at, you know, using Google to answer all my questions. So that's kind of been the major thing, you know, though I'm not really using school. The major thing I am using is the research skills that I learned and the unconventional ways of finding things that I learned.
I love that answer. And I think also for an academia type mind, that it's very useful to have diversity and not feel locked down into a particular title. So I would say for you that probably works well that your boss can't really define who you are, because in my mind, as a writer and as someone of an astute mind, I think maybe it can sometimes take away from that creativity. So let me ask you this, you know, with today's social media world and how there's just point and point here and new things happening here and new influencers and experts happening here, how do you stay consistent with your message and your voice?
Well, I think the really big thing, Matt, is it all comes back down to communication, right? Like when texting started, when a lot of the social media started, we forgot how to communicate and how to be human beings. And if you learn how to retain that skill and just apply it to social media, it's really big, right? You know, introduce yourself to people, find out what's needed and wanted, deliver that. And though it's kind of simple, a lot of people don't even think to do that. You know, it's influencer marketing has been good, but it's also kind of created this type of person, you know, look how cool I am, look at all the things I'm doing, and it doesn't really add value to other people. And that's kind of been the biggest thing that I've looked to do is how can I help you? You know what I mean? Because I love seeing other people do well. I love seeing other people succeed. And when you come at people from really communicating, really acknowledging their communication, because that's one of the big things. You know, you send an email out and nobody answers it. You know, if you acknowledge a communication and you actually come at people from a place of genuinely wanting to help, you can build a real sustainable brand on social media that way.
I could not agree with you more. And I think one of the things that I've learned as I've transitioned from more of a corporate setting to more of an entrepreneurial setting is that need for organic engagement is more now than it ever was before. And, you know, something that I find so valuable that you just said there is that most people don't understand that just sending an email is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Just sending a message is not enough. You've got to continue to go that extra mile. Wouldn't you say, to continue to try to get the attention of the person you want?
Well, it's not even just that. I'm just saying, like for example, you talk to somebody, they go right on to the next thing. They don't acknowledge what you just said. You know what I mean? Your communication was never finished. And that's really annoying to people. So if you end up being the person that actually says, hey, totally got that. Okay, but I want to talk about this now. It actually makes people look at you differently because they say, hey, this guy actually cares and pays attention. A lot of people, and I say email because I see this especially in business. If you send somebody an email that gives them a piece of information and they don't really need to act on it, they just don't acknowledge it. So you're like, oh, did they get it? Did they see it? You know, if I get an email and it doesn't require, you know, somebody to do something, I say, hey, totally got it. Thank you for telling me. And that's something a lot of people don't do, is just acknowledge a communication. So it's just kind of floating out there in the ether. And it's really troubling to somebody when you put something out there and somebody doesn't respond to you. And to actually be the person that finishes that communication line kind of changes the way things work, you know?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I find to be the most aggravating is we spend this time to want to get someone's attention, and then when they give us our attention, it's like, thanks a lot, have a good one.
Yeah.
And so I've even noticed with people that have come on my podcast, you know, there's some that, man, I create instantaneous relationships with, and we're building and building and building. Then there's some people that I think like the thought of coming on the show. They bring great value, but then they fell off a little bit. And
yeah.
And then I go back and challenge and say, hey, I just want to, you know, where did we go wrong? So I think it's that consistency that you talked about of being a communicator, but not falling victim to only communicating online.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to drive that to offline channels or more consistent online channels. So,
well, that's honestly, Matt, one of the biggest things I've done in my networking. And when I meet a lot of people for the first time, I've usually known them online for a while or something like that. So I usually have a very friendly relationship with people. And, you know, my wife, my friends, a lot of these people are shocked because they're like, you don't know that person. It's like, yeah, but I actually spent time to learn who they are, what they need, how things are going. So I like them, you know what I mean? And I want to really meet that person. So I've really used online to make real offline relationships, because a lot of people, I think, just kind of stick in this online space and don't really do anything with it.
Well, and for our listeners out there, I want to make sure that we go back and highlight a point that Jeremy made and that he continues to expand upon, is that it's the skill of research. When you meet someone online, Google.com is a great place to begin researching that relationship and expanding on who they are and what they bring to the table. More importantly, is that, for instance, Jeremy, I knew that I wanted to bring you on the show based on research that I did prior to reaching out to you to come on the show.
Oh, shucks, man.
For a guy that doesn't like to talk about himself, you're very accomplished, and to be in that millennial space and to have the professionalism and to have the class that you operate with is something that, man, I definitely want to be around, and I want my family to be around, and I want my network to be around. So, being an accomplished author.
Yeah.
And once again, being an academia mind.
Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest challenge early on writing those books?
Well, I only actually have one book that's out. I have another one that I'm working on about using a podcast to build a personal brand. So I'm still looking for a publisher for that one. I think, like I said, the biggest struggle for me was taking academic writing to writing that actually, is helpful and communicates to the everyday person. You know what I mean? Because I'm used to writing to the academic that's looking for citations, that's looking for what my dad always liked to call growing up $10 words. You know what I mean? They want to say the simplest thing possible in the most complicated way possible. And you have to get yourself out of that way of thinking, because if you hit people with misunderstood words, they're gone, right? And so you have to really understand that and what you're putting down, man. So that was one of the biggest things for me, is I tried to write too complicated because that's just how I was trained. So it started for me with writing articles for different websites, Influencive, Huffington Post. And once I kind of got that down and saw they were resonating with people, that's when I started working on, a publication. And I said, okay, I'm at the point where I can actually help somebody with this and not kind of put it over their head because I'm trying to sound too smart. You know what I mean?
Oh, I completely agree with you. And once again, not to toot your own horn, so to speak, but I struggled with that very same thing. Mm-hmm. Early on in school, history and English were classes and areas of study that I excelled at levels that were years ahead of everyone else. And unfortunately, when I would write things, it would be above the normal thought.
Right.
And I was misunderstood for being arrogant, for being cocky, for trying to sound too smart. And then it discouraged me a little bit. So then I would try to water down what I would write, and I'd sound like some redneck from Tennessee, which I am. But at the end of the day, I think it's trying to find that balance.
Right.
And so I love how you were able to use your academics to your advantage almost to help you start finding that fine point by writing those articles, by being able to get published in the Huffington Post and Influencive.com, which is awesome, by the way. With that being said, every challenge also yields a great reward. So what was one of the biggest rewards that you felt coming off the publication of your first book?
Gosh, I guess having my name known a little bit, because I know Montclair State University here in Jersey bought like 1,000 copies. Because like I said, it was a more academic book. It was something that hadn't really been looked at before. So I think that was really the only thing. It was also a major learning moment for me because I thought it was going to be a lot bigger than it was. And, if you write a title in Latin, I don't think you're really asking for it to communicate to people. You're just kind of saying, well, look how smart and intelligent I am. And, that people don't like that. And it doesn't communicate to somebody. So I think the biggest thing that I learned was that I had to figure out how I could actually communicate to people and not just spit out, look at how smart I am. I know I'm kind of reiterating that a little bit, but I think that's really been my biggest takeaway, that it didn't do well. And, that's kind of what I learned from putting that out there. It was a great piece. Nobody had written on it before. It's a new discovery in history, but nobody cares because I didn't put it in a way that communicated to people.
So, you're a competitive guy, you're a very physically fit guy. So you can definitely tell that you put a lot of thought into it. I love that. You put a lot of thought and effort into everything that you do, and you challenge yourself. So knowing that didn't go very well, being a very high-minded, being an academic, protege, so to speak.
Right.
what kept you focused on not letting the discouragement of it not going well to continue to push you forward?
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, being that I wrote that book when I was like 23, 24, it took me until I was 28 to do anything. So there was some discouragement for a while, man. There was also a few careers in the meantime as well. I spent 2 years as a history teacher. I did network marketing full time for 3 years, all while selling life insurance at the same time. So I wasn't really, I guess, in the place to be able to, write again, because I wasn't really focused on my own goals and my own purpose. And it wasn't until starting this podcast last November that I really figured out what my purpose was, what the heck I'm doing here. And if you're writing just to write, it doesn't really make any sense if there's no purpose behind it. So if you read a lot of the things I write, it's more from this viewpoint of success is this idea of forgetting about these things that we call challenges, figuring out how to get around them. I'm not really a woo-woo guy. So I'm more about finding, more of a tone down, I think, of where Grant Cardone comes from. Kind of looking at certain things as bull and figuring out how to get around them, acknowledging that they happen, but getting around them. And I think that's been kind of my life experience in, not quite finding my niche in business for a few years, because I've been through numerous businesses in my 20s before I figured out what I really wanted to do. And, ended up in marketing and media and podcasting,
I love that. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, when you have a guest like Jeremy who interviews people and does this every day, it's always nice to be able to transition right into the next part of what you want to talk about. So, and with that, you talked about creating your podcast last November and how it was focus and how it was purpose that helped you kind of get to that point. What led you, number one, to the podcast, and number two, what has it done for Jeremy Slate since?
Well, this is funny, but I got to give a lot of credit to GC on this one. And reason being, I actually went to Peru last May. The Rotary Club ran a thing to go help the people there. It was like a mission trip type thing. And I decided I was going to start a podcast when I got back. I knew nothing of what I was doing, did it. It was horrible. It went for about 60 days and quit. That was the end of it. I didn't really interview anybody. It was the graphic design looked like it was done by a third grader in, Microsoft Paint. So it really didn't go so well, man. And I quit. And I've read the 10X Rule probably, numerous times, but I actually read that book again over the summer last year. And, the thing that hit me was that whole thing of don't be a little bitch. And it kind of made me look at it. Okay, well, you took these tiny little actions, right? And of course you're not going to get a result. So I went and found everything that I would need to know in order to deliver this, made a list of the top 100 people that I was going to need to interview to actually make this happen. And it's funny because in working for production for other people, my wife has said, do we really need to have a list of 100? And I said, yes, because it's a big goal. It's a big think. And that was the real big thing that I have to give credit to Grant for, was this whole idea of forcing me to think bigger and actually making me take bigger action. And that's why it was successful the second time around. I took this little tiny action that showed I didn't want to do it right, that I didn't want to win. You got to take big action to win, and that's why the second time around it worked better. I had better design work. I spent money on the right equipment. I spent money on the right training, so I actually knew how to do it. And I made that big list. If you don't have a big list of people to talk to, it's like saying you want to stay small,
I could not agree with you more. And for those that are going to see this video on our YouTube channel that goes out to 6 different continents, for those that are listening to this right now on iTunes and SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, and across many different podcast areas, I got the 10X Rule right over my left shoulder.
I see it.
That was also a book that broke the mold for me. So I think in a sense that GC was the guy that also transitioned me to where I'm at today too. So, and you know what? You've had some great interviews, Grant Cardone, Pat Flynn. Man, you've interviewed some amazing people. But what was that underdog, so to speak, that when you booked them, maybe you weren't really sure how the interview might go, and when it was done, you walked away going, "Wow, that was impressive."
It wasn't really that, Matt. There wasn't really that hesitation going into it. It was more like, are they going to answer my email? Are they going to say yes? And it was kind of like, once I got it, that was the victory for me. I'd figure out how to make it go right once I got there, because I've been pretty good at, my early episodes kind of sucked in terms of how I did it, but as I did it more, I got better at it. So for me, it was really securing that interview, and I'd figure it out once I got there. That was kind of the big victory for me. Grant Cardone, it took me 7 emails to actually connect with him, and it wasn't even because of email, it was because I met him in public, but it's the idea of continually putting it out there that actually helps you to do it. So it's continually doing those actions that made it for me. And I didn't really have hesitation if it would go well, because I prepared a lot. I listened to other interviews people did. I did things like that. So, it's funny because I was just a source for an article for Inc. where they talked about, ways to be a great podcaster. And one of the big things that I do that other people don't do is I listen to at least portions of shows of people I'm going to interview or other shows I'm going to be on. So I know how I can be the best to deliver that. And I also know how the person communicates because okay, I have to talk more, talk less. They like to say these certain things, so I can be geared towards this. And so, for example, when I did that interview with Grant, I got done, and my wife goes, "You fed him his talking points." I said, "Yeah, but it's more fun that way, right? Because you're going to get a better product in the end, and it actually shows you are prepared for what you're doing."
Well, and so a little secret sauce to the power of great, but Jeremy, listening to your Create Your Own Life podcast, you've also been a source for me on that very thing you just said on how to be a great interviewer is to really be able to transition the interviewee by feeding them their talking points. By really helping them be comfortable, breaking down some of those barriers. And in a sense, it almost just becomes a natural conversation.
Yeah.
So, there again, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, you need to get over to iTunes. You need to download my man Jeremy Slate's podcast, Create Your Own Life. It didn't hit number 1 on New and Noteworthy. It hadn't been number 1 on multiple categories. It certainly hasn't been in the top 30 overall for a reason. It's been there because he's put in the work, he's put in the effort, but he also knows how to deliver a great show. And, before we move into the backside of our podcast today, I want to give a huge shout out to the team at Rush Impact Media. My man, Jeremy Warner, and the guys and gals there do an amazing job behind the scenes to help power up the power of great. And I'm super honored to have them there. But, you talked about too, Jeremy, that you currently help podcasters learn how to podcast, learn how to create that outline, that template, that mission, that goal. So walk us through if Matt Crane wanted to reach out to Jeremy and find out how he can help. Do you help people that are looking to start a podcast, that already have a podcast, or are looking to improve their podcast? I mean, walk us through that process.
Well, that may be the helping podcasters may be something they may eventually do. Right now, it's not what we do. I actually look for people that are already successful in business, that are looking for a way to get their mission out there because they already have a defined mission. They already have a product that I can help them get ROI on. They already have an email list. So we really help them develop that mission. We help them set up the initial interviews. We do a press tour for them and get them in publications and stuff like that before everything happens, because you have to create the buzz before you deliver the show, because then there's nobody to launch it to. So, step 1 is getting them in other shows, getting them publications, things like that. Step 2 is actually developing the show, putting the vision together, getting all the interviews scheduled. And then step 3 is that launch, man. Launch is, as well as I do, that launch is huge because you got to get new and noteworthy. And not everybody does it. So that's 8 weeks of free promotion. And then we also have my wife on the other side of the company that does all the PR and the pitching and getting them in various publications and stuff like that. So really, this is a done-for-you model. I even send them their equipment and everything. So it's a done-for-you model for busy executives that want to get their message out but don't want to, hire somebody to do it on their, in their company because they'd have to train them, or don't have the time to do it themselves, but they want all the impact,
Oh, man, what a great tip. Getting in publications prior to that launch, really getting visible, man, that's a great tip. Something that I wish I would have been able to reach out to you so much earlier.
Well, to that extent, Matt, too, the secret to it is you got to get a mention in one of them. Then you use that mention to get a contributor in another one. And then once you have a couple contributors, other publications care when you approach them. It's a stair-step approach.
Love that. I love that, man. And it almost seems so simple, but yet there's a lot of complexity to it. And there's so much competitiveness now. So guys like you and companies that you and your wife run are really viable because you're helping people dominate in a space that's not going anywhere. If anything, it's only going to expand. I had Vincenzo Landino on my show, and he said something to me that was really kind of stood out, and I would love to get your take.
Yeah.
That podcasting still kind of that unknown realm. And yet there's so many people trying to do it and so many people that are trying to put podcasting out there. What's your take on podcasters that aren't really getting the success or are not growing their podcast like they should?
I hate to be somewhat offensive here, but they're either not continually introducing themselves to new people, so they're not trying to pitch publications, they're not trying to go to events, they're not trying to pitch big enough guests. It's continually introducing yourself to new people, whether it be one-on-one, whether it be at events, whether it be through writing. And that's one of the reasons I try to do as much as I can, because I want every single person in the world to know about me, because obscurity is your biggest enemy. And if you're obscure, right, nobody's going to download your show, nobody's going to know about your show. You know, I had good numbers. They were stagnant until last month, stagnant meaning steady. And then a lot of this stuff went into effect last month, and now my numbers are starting to go up by 30, 40%. So that's one of the biggest things you have to think with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you said something earlier that was really smart. And a lot of people, I want to once again highlight that, is that you've got to take big actions to get big results. Mm-hmm. And that means meeting more people. That means playing the numbers game. If you're going to meet 10 people, you're probably going to book one, but you need to meet 100 to possibly book 10. So, really think on a bigger scale. So, Jeremy, for you, this podcast is starting to grow exponentially. The marketing company's starting to grow exponentially. You got a new book on deck. So the next 60 to 90 days, what do you see being one of the most important steps that you're going to make to help this thing continue to go?
Well, we are looking to take on at least 2 more clients. I met with somebody on Monday, so that's kind of the goal on that, and really get the media end of things established. I have some big guests I've been working on. I can't say whether or not they're going to be accomplished yet. So the whole idea is really just growing the podcast and growing, the media side of things and putting a lot of time in there. That's really the next 60 to 90 days. The book I don't see coming out until after the new year, because we're still looking for a publisher on that. So, I don't want to think too small and try and self-publish, because, I'm not somebody like Grant or somebody like that has a big enough brand that they could self-publish and it'll really take off. I'm really looking for some publisher help to kind of do that. So that's, I guess, kind of more of what the next 60 to 90 look like, is focusing on getting bigger guests for the show and, growing the media side of things.
I love that. And I also love your take there. You recognize that your brand maybe not be as big as you need it to be to try to take on that self-published role. So that's a smart way to look at it, and another great tip.
And I say that because I've self-published before, you know what I mean? So I've been in that experience, and sometimes when you're new, you need the gas behind you of somebody that's established.
Love that. And I think, again, that's a great tip that many people out there who are wanting to write books or aspiring to be an author, hey, you need to do that research in advance as well, too. Understand your brand, understand who's watching and looking at you, and then you need to figure out whether you need to go self-publish or you need to look for a publisher. So, so how do people get in touch with you, Jeremy? How can they follow you, and then how can they reach out to you for possible opportunities to do business with you?
Well, they can check out the show and everything having to do with my personal brand over at jeremyryanslate.com. If they're interested in the business side of things, and the best place to contact us is over at slatemediaproductions.com, and they can reach out to me via email, jeremy@slatemediaproductions.com.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another great episode of The Power of Great with my man, Jeremy Ryan Slate. If you want to do business with him, you want to check him out at slatemediaproductions.com. You definitely want to get to iTunes and download Create Your Own Life podcast. Look, I'm a podcaster myself, and that podcast is something that I truly enjoy listening to every time a new episode drops. So every week I leave you with this on the podcast. Success is not measured by what you step out of, but rather by what you're committed to step into. And this week, we had Jeremy Ryan Slate really show us just what that's all about. So I appreciate you allowing me to be your host, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you again right here on The Power of Great next week.